You wake up in a room that smells faintly of coal smoke, old paper, and boiled coffee. The mattress beneath you is lumpy, the sheets are coarse, and a curious spring somewhere in the middle presses insistently into your back. Outside your narrow window, the snow has fallen in soft layers over a slushy Chicago street. Its steel wheels shriek as it rounds a curve, sending vibrations down the street and into your teeth. No private bathrooms here. You'll be sharing with the 4 strangers who live down the hall. Bring your own soap, and don't expect privacy. That ship sailed sometime during the Spanish-American War. Somewhere below, a milk wagon clatters by, pulled by an actual horse. Yes, those still exist. This is a strange time, part modern, part leftover. The horse and the Model T still compete for parking. You hear the hiss of the radiator in the corner, ambitiously warm, but ultimately more theatrical than functional. That helps us keep doing this slow-motion time travel thing. And if you're listening right now, I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. What city? What time? It always amazes me how people fall asleep to the roaring 20s from every corner of the globe. A few weeks from now, its back room will sell something far stronger than cough syrup. Even the barber shop might start carrying tonic for the soul ... and the liver. But now it becomes the name of a national rebellion, a quiet, whispered refusal to behave. A whole underground culture begins to bloom beneath the surface, like mushrooms after rain hidden, illegal and occasionally poisonous. It's January 1920, and you live in a boarding house with walls so thin you can hear the man next door snore in Morse code. That door with no sign? By February, it'll open to a jazz club. That grimy window with curtains drawn? A whiskey joint by Valentine's Day. The city hums with secret invitations and knowing glances. A train rumbles by overhead. It's the elevated kind, the L, and the clink of mismatched teacups filled with anything but tea. You roll out of bed with all the grace of a flour sack, your feet hitting the wooden floor like dropped books. On your little knit stand is a copy of the Chicago Tribune, and today's headline stops your breath just long enough to spill your morning cough into your sleeve. Prohibition begins. Alcohol now illegal nationwide. And so, congratulations. You've just woken up on the first full day of America's grand social experiment, the national ban on booze. But before we tumble further into the decade, let me gently remind you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, back to Chicago, January 1920. You wrap a scratchy scarf around your neck and make your way downstairs for breakfast oatmeal, black coffee, and overheard gossip. The factory worker at the next table mutters, "Guess we're all saints now," while everyone chuckles into their toast. You know better. Everyone does. Whispers swirl around the table like steam from chipped mugs. "My cousin knows a guy," someone murmurs. It begins like that, quietly, illegally, and very, very quickly. Within days, the saloons close. But behind a tailor's shop, a locked basement door opens password required. The pharmacy on the corner? Welcome to the age of the speakeasy. The term isn't new. It's been around since the 1800s, whispered in dry counties and moralistic towns. You walk to work through slushy streets, watching the world transform. Historians still debate whether the government truly believed prohibition would eliminate alcohol, or if they simply underestimated how inventive stubborn and thirsty Americans could be. Either way, they lost. The Roaring Twenties didn't begin with a shout. They began with a knock 3 times on an alley door, a whispered password. And you're about to find out just how lively things can get when the law says they shouldn't. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey and see what the rest of 1920 has in store. It's Friday now, and though the sun's barely risen, the city already murmurs with possibility. You've made it through another week at the factory, 12 hours a day of noise, smoke, and the comforting rhythm of repetition. Your muscles ache in familiar ways, and your fingernails have acquired that industrial-grade tint that doesn't wash off, no matter how determined your soap. But tonight, you're going out. Not in the polite, well-behaved sense. Not a sit quietly and knit by the fire sort of outing. No, this is something else. Something with saxophones. You head home after your shift, shoes scuffing across salted sidewalks. The snow is old, now more gray than white, crusted over with footprints and tire grooves. A child throws a snowball that misses everyone and hits a lamppost. You nod approvingly. Word travels by coat-check girls and bakers and distant cousins who once fixed a radio for a man with a mustache and excellent whiskey. You walk 2 blocks past where you're supposed to be. Then you double back. And 100,000 speakeasies in New York City, alone a city that previously had around 15,000 legal bars. Prohibition didn't reduce drinking. It simply changed the rules. Dinner is quick. A slice of meatloaf, some potatoes, a piece of pie that looks like it's seen things. You eat, you change. You stare into the mirror and slick your hair back with the kind of confidence that can only be built from absolutely no experience. She glances at you once, blows smoke sideways, and knocks twice on the metal door. It opens like a secret. You find a rhythm between her shoulder and the beat, your shoes scuffing over the tile like they're writing a nervous letter. People clap. Someone yells, you spin too hard and laugh, because you're going dancing. Men in tuxedos lean in close to women with glittering eyes. Short hair, short skirts, and gasp stockings that rolled at the knee. You decline. He shrugs, lights his own, and watches the dancers like he's memorizing every step. The term may have originated from British slang, describing young women who hadn't yet fastened their shoes. But sitting here in the haze of jazz and cigarette smoke, you don't care. You're not here for clarity. Fitting, because these women were running, dancing, leaping into modernity and leaving corsets behind like battlefield casualties. A man with a violin plays a solo so sad it makes someone spill their drink in contemplation. Waiters pass trays of drinks that definitely aren't legal, but no one asks. The dance floor is packed with flappers and fedoras, young people with fast feet and faster tongues. A live jazz band plays a number you've never heard, but somehow already know. What started as a single knock on a basement door has turned into something timeless. You could be anywhere. You could be anyone, and you're terrified. The club doesn't advertise. It doesn't need to. A woman in feathers smokes outside. She looks like she's been dipped in champagne and doesn't mind a bit. Inside, velvet shadows, hot brass, and perfume thick enough to count as oxygen. The wind kisses your face in that aggressive Chicago way, and your ears ache from the temperature shift. But your chest is warm. You are in a speakeasy, and here's your historical moment of the night. By 1925, It is estimated there were between 30,000 back in Chicago. The speakeasy smells of gin and floor polish. You order something fizzy and a glass with a suspicious orange peel, and try not to ask what's in it. The woman in feathers takes your arm. "Come on," she says, in a voice that rhymes with trouble, and suddenly you're dancing. It's not graceful. It's not elegant, but it's real. All around you, the club pulses. Here is your obscure cultural tidbit. The flapper wasn't just a fashion trend. She was a declaration. You sit down, flushed and breathless. The man next to you offers a cigarette. The music changes. A slower tune now, softer, almost melancholy. You realize suddenly it's after midnight. Time does that here. It folds and stretches, loses track of itself. Historians still debate whether the speakeasies truly represented freedom or just stylish escapism. You're here to forget the factory, the week, the world outside, and it's working. You step outside into the frozen silence. Maybe it's the gin, or maybe it's something else. The weekend continues in its strange, slippery way. You spend Saturday morning at the movies, your favorite place to disappear. The theater is dark, crowded, and warm. You sit near the front, the better to be fully swallowed by the silver screen. The piano player tunes up. The film begins. It's silent, of course, just flickering black and white images, accompanied by the stuttering genius of live music and the occasional gasp from the woman 2 seats down. You watch as actors leap, weep, and chase each other across sets made of cardboard and dreams. There's a villain with a mustache so crooked it might be a warning sign. There's a heroine who faints beautifully, and inside them you could forget everything, your job, your bills, even your name, if only for 90 minutes. It was the dominant form of entertainment, accessible, communal, and cheap, usually 5 cents for entry, entire worlds for a nickel. And somewhere behind it all, you hear the audience breathing together. Here's your historical moment. By the mid-1920s, over 50 million Americans went to the movies each week. The theaters themselves were temples. Red velvet curtains, ornate gold trim, ceilings painted with stars. Movie palaces, they were called. You leave the theater blinking like you've been underwater. The sun is too bright. The snow has melted into a sad slurry. But the world feels different now. You gather around it with 3 other friends, each holding a chipped mug of something warm, and wait for the magic. Now, families gathered around radios the way they once gathered around fireplaces. It became the center of the home, not for warmth, but for connection. It's a news bulletin: someone won a boxing match in Detroit. Then music begins, scratchy, thin, perfect. A jazz trio broadcast live from New York. You sit back and close your eyes. Larger, like anything could happen, even in your neighborhood. Later, you visit a friend, Clara, who works as a typist in a downtown office and insists on calling herself a modern woman. She wears trousers at home, drinks black coffee, and reads magazines with headlines like, "Are you using lipstick correctly?" and "How to Train a Husband in 30 Days. She also has a radio. It sits on a small table like a futuristic visitor. A voice crackles to life. This is new. This is miraculous. You are listening to a performance happening hundreds of miles away right now. Not days later in the paper. Not weeks later in conversation. Obscure cultural tidbit. In 1922, the first regular radio broadcasts began in the United States. You and Clara don't speak much as the music plays. You don't need to. The radio fills the room like candlelight. Historians still debate whether technology like radio brought people closer or simply rearranged their silences. You suspect it did both. Eventually the music fades. You help wash the mugs. You say your goodbyes. And you walk home under a sky full of static and stars. It's Sunday afternoon now, the kind of day meant for doing nothing in particular. The air smells faintly of baking bread and motor oil. Somewhere someone is playing a phonograph too loud, and somewhere else someone is yelling at their dog in a voice too soft to be convincing. You walk to the park because that's what people do when they not working and not pretending they someone else in a basement club. Parks are the great equalizers. Grass, benches, pigeons. In 1920s America, public parks are where modernity pauses and breathes. Two girls chase after him, laughing with their arms outstretched like windmills. A man in a hat reads Popular Mechanics, squinting like he's deciphering a code. Somewhere nearby, someone is trying to teach a dog how to dance. The dog disagrees. Today, the world smells of spring. Your shoes crunch across gravel. A boy runs past holding a kite made from newspaper and hope. Their dresses are shorter than their mothers would approve of. Their laughter is unladylike in the best way. You sit on a bench, close your eyes, and listen. Today, there's a teenage trio playing something ragged but sincere. An old man feeding ducks with such focus you'd think it was a civic duty. You look around at the park and think maybe. Both, you sit on the grass and listen. The music tumbling over itself like puppies in a basket. Jazz from a passing radio. Distant shouts from a baseball diamond. The rhythmic slap of someone jumping rope. The 8-hour workday, once a radical idea, became more common. And for the first time, people began asking not just how to work, but how to rest. This is what leisure looks like. Here is your historical slice. The 1920s were the first full decade where Americans began to experience mass leisure time, thanks in part to shorter working hours, urbanization, and technology. Across the park, a group of young women are playing a surprisingly competitive game of tennis. Closer by, a man opens a folding chair and a newspaper, pretending not to watch them. And here's your obscure cultural footnote. In the 1920s, public opinion was still deeply divided on whether it was proper for women to engage in strenuous sports. Some believed tennis and basketball would damage female reproductive organs or worse, encourage independence. Women played anyway. They ran, jumped, sweat, and smiled. And the world kept spinning. You wander over to a little bandstand near the pond. On Sundays, amateur musicians sometimes gather there, clarinetists, banjo players, small-time trumpet men. People pass by in twos and threes, lovers walking slowly, children arguing about sticks. Historians still debate whether this sudden explosion of public leisure made America more unified or more fragmented, whether free time brought people together or simply gave them more choices to drift apart. By sunset, the light glows gold on the buildings. You walk home under a sky that smells like warm pavement and clover. And when you get to your room, you find a scrap of paper under your door. Scrawled in Clara's handwriting, "Dance hall, Tuesday. You're going. No excuses." You smile. Because leisure, it turns out, is contagious. Tuesday comes with rain. Not the angry, thunderous kind, just a gentle drizzle. soft as a sigh, that lingers on coat sleeves and makes lamplight shimmer like old gold. The sidewalk glistens. Umbrellas bloom across the city like careful mushrooms, and yet the dance hall is packed. Inside, the air is warm and humid with sweat, perfume, and anticipation. Your coat sticks to your back. Your hair is doing something unplanned. But you're here. You scan the room. Its large vaulted ceiling, wooden floor, walls lined with mirrors that make the crowd feel endless. A four-piece band sets up in the corner, arguing quietly about tempo. Someone brings punch. Someone else spikes it. Everyone pretends not to notice. Clara finds you before you find your footing. "Thought you'd back out," she says, handing you a glass. "You've got that look." You raise an eyebrow. "What look?" "That look that says, I'd rather be watching ducks." She's not wrong. But you stay anyway. Feet start tapping. Shoulders sway. A couple in the center begins a Charleston that's more enthusiasm than accuracy, but the crowd cheers anyway. In New York alone, there were over 500 of them by mid-decade. They offered affordable entertainment, social connection, and just somewhere for young people to flirt under the guise of physical coordination. And soon, the music begins. It's loud, a little chaotic, and impossible to ignore. You don't know all the steps. Most people don't. That's not the point. Here's your historical snapshot. Dance halls were a cornerstone of urban leisure in the 1920s. Elbows, hips, and knees everywhere. Someone invents a move on the spot. Someone else immediately copies it. You spin too fast. You apologize. Someone spills something near your shoes. You don't care. No shimmying. No excessive swiveling. No horizontal expressions of vertical intentions, as one polite manual put it. Naturally, this only made people dance harder. Clara pulls you onto the floor. The beat is fast. Your steps are slow, you move anyway. A girl does the Lindy Hop with such flair, she nearly kicks over a chair. Tonight, none of that matters. A boy invents a routine that involves cartwheeling into the exit. The crowd cheers. The band plays on. Dancing in the 1920s is a teen sport of chaos, because you're laughing. The music gets faster, or the rent, or what anyone else is doing. And suddenly, you're not thinking about the factory. You're just moving. Here's your quirky cultural tidbit. In some cities, dance police were hired to make sure dances stayed within moral boundaries. By midnight, your feet are sore, your clothes are damp, and your heart feels 10 pounds lighter. You sit at the edge of the hall, nursing punch, and watching others twirl through the fog of their own joy. Historians still debate whether dance halls were liberating or dangerous, modern or vulgar, progressive or deeply unsettling to the old guard. Tonight you feel like the world cracked open just wide enough for you to slip in and leave your worries outside. When you finally make it home, it's late. Your coat is soaked. Your feet are numb, and still you're smiling, because tonight you lived loudly enough to be tired. It's Wednesday, and your back hurts. Not in the, I should see a doctor, way more in the, I danced like someone who's never danced before and forgot about gravity way. You shuffle around your small room, mumbling apologies to your own legs. The rain from Tuesday is gone, replaced with a sky that's all pale sunlight and second chances. But today isn't for dancing. It's run by a man named Bill, who always smells faintly of licorice and pessimism. He nods at you, gestures at the stack of pulp magazines, and mutters, "Got the new one in." It's for reading. Bright cover, impossible font, some poor woman being carried off by a robot. You hand over a nickel and tuck the magazine into your coat like it's treasure. Because it is. You stop by the corner newsstand on your way home from work. Stories that let you climb out of this world and step into another. And there it is, amazing stories. It opened up new worlds for ordinary people, especially working-class readers hungry for something bigger than their own rooftops. This was imagination you could afford. The window is open, just enough to let in a breeze that smells like asphalt and popcorn from the street cart below. Somewhere, a radio plays a waltz, and the city softens its edges. The room fades away, the factory vanishes, the city becomes distant. But in your world, distraction is sometimes the only form of relief you get. She rolls her eyes at the robot, but gets suspiciously quiet during the story about the time-traveling librarian. You know she's hooked. You've always liked stories, especially the weird ones. Martians, time travel, ghosts who solve crimes. Here's your historical anchor. In 1926, Hugo Gernsback launched Amazing Stories, the first magazine dedicated exclusively to science fiction. Too many books were believed to cause literary hysteria, a completely fabricated condition that sounds suspiciously like enjoying yourself too much. At home, you stretch out on your cot with a plate of beans and toast and lose yourself in a story about moon colonies and anti-gravity shoes. In this moment, you are floating above Venus, saving a lost civilization with a wrench and a good moral compass. Obscure cultural tidbit. In the 1920s, people feared that too much reading, especially for women, might overstimulate the nerves. You keep reading anyway. Later that night, you lend the magazine to Clara. You sit together in silence for a while. Historians still debate whether these pulpy escapist stories helped Americans cope with modernity or just offered a colorful distraction. And tonight, that's enough. You go to bed thinking of space helmets and secret codes and adventures that don't involve a time clock. And you dream of stars. The weekend creeps up again, quiet and casual. Saturday morning is market day. You wake early, stretch, and slip into a coat that's trying very hard to keep its seams together. You walk slowly, letting it all wash over you. The seller is a woman with thick glasses and thicker opinions. You buy a collection of essays you'll probably never read, and a postcard with a goose on it for no real reason. The sky is clear. The street is loud with vendors, carts, and the slightly accusatory clatter of cabbage crates. Markets in the 1920s are a century buffet. The tang of fresh oranges, the shout of a butcher making questionable claims, the hiss of a hot dog cart. You stop at the used books table. This is free time at its most luxurious, completely unstructured, unapologetically aimless. You buy a small bag of roasted peanuts. You eat them one at a time like each one is a decision. Your historical detail for this walkabout. The 1920s saw a rise in consumer culture, especially in urban areas. For the first time, advertisements became part of daily life on billboards, in newspapers, on radio. You make a mental note not to try that one. You weren't just shopping for necessity. You were shopping for identity, and sometimes ... for mood. You pass a drugstore with a new display. Cold cream, now with radioactive minerals. Either way, you're glad for it. The lanes are slick, the balls are chipped, and the scoreboard is managed by a teenager who's pretty sure he's too cool to exist. It was affordable, social, and crucially indoors. By 1929, more than 100,000 people belonged to amateur bowling leagues across the country. Then something catches your eye, a storefront with blinking lights and bold lettering, Electric Bowling. Clara shows up half an hour later wearing trousers again, a look of deep mischief and absolutely no bowling skill. You each rent shoes that smell like someone else's Tuesday. You bowl like someone throwing bricks into a river. Clara bowls like she's trying to open a secret portal to another dimension. It's perfect. Here's your obscure cultural side note. Bowling surged in popularity in the 1920s, especially among working-class Americans. After 3 rounds and a truly spectacular gutter ball from Clara, you sit in the corner with bottles of root beer and that giddy exhaustion that only follows unnecessary competition. Historians still debate whether the rise of games like bowling and bridge reflected a shift toward community building or just a need to distract people from the rest of their lives. Because tonight your arms are sore from laughter, your stomach hurts from joy, and your pockets are lighter, but your heart isn't. You walk home with Clara under a sky smeared with stars and the faint, orange glow of distant lamplight. And when you finally drift off to sleep, your dreams are a slow roll of pins falling gently, one after another, until the world goes quiet. The days are getting longer now. Even the buildings seem to sigh into the warmth. Windows stay open a little later, laundry dries faster, and the corners of the city that once smelled like coal dust now smell faintly of lilacs and hot pavement, and pretzels from the pushcart near the elevated train. Today you're going to the amusement park. Yes, that's still a thing. Even in the 1920s, maybe especially in the 1920s, you step onto the rickety trolley, which shudders and jerks forward with the urgency of a hung-over mule. Children are already screaming, not in fear, just preemptive excitement. Someone's brought a basket of sandwiches that smells entirely of onions. Someone else keeps trying to sing, badly. You arrive after 25 minutes of scenic bumping, or some other gloriously overstated name painted in chipped red letters across an arched gate. It promises thrills, joy, and depending on the sign, a dancing bear named Harold. You're skeptical. And the collective gasp of people who just remembered gravity at the top of a ride. And there it is, Luna Park, or Dreamland. Inside, the sounds are immediate and overwhelming. Mechanical whirs, barkers shouting, carousel music on a loop, with more leisure time and a growing middle class. Families and singles alike flocked to roller coasters, penny arcades, and food stands. It sways like it's auditioning for a different job. The rides were sometimes terrifying. The hot dogs were always suspect. The memories? Unforgettable. This is not where you come for peace. This is where you come to feel awake. You look 10 feet tall, then 2 feet wide, then like an accordion with regrets. You laugh, you don't stop. Even when you bump into yourselves. Here's your historical flashbulb. In the 1920s, amusement parks exploded in popularity, especially in cities. One popular display involved mechanical mannequins showing a girl's descent into ruin after jazz dancing. Visitors usually giggled, then went dancing. On the third try, the ring bounces somehow back toward you. The carny looks unimpressed. You sit on a bench and watch the carousel spin, round and round, the painted horses galloping nowhere fast. You try the Ferris wheel. You try a game where you're supposed to toss a ring onto a bottle neck. You miss entirely twice. You eat a funnel cake that defies logic and basic health. It tastes like victory and sugar and dust. You and Clara wander into the hall of mirrors and spend far too long pretending not to be lost. Here is your obscure tidbit. Amusement parks in the 1920s sometimes featured moral exhibits, odd little sideshows meant to warn visitors about the dangers of vice. By late afternoon, your feet hurt, your ears are ringing, and you're carrying a paper crown someone gave you for no reason. Historians still debate whether amusement parks were symbols of escapism or early indicators of mass consumerism. But for now, they're just fun. In the discovery that leisure isn't just about escape, it's about repair. And sometimes that's enough. You ride the trolley home in silence, head against the window, the paper crown squashed under your arm. And when you sleep that night, your dreams spin in slow, dizzy circles. The air smells of old books, floor polish, and moral superiority. A sign on the door says no talking. Another says no loitering. You ignore both very quietly. By now, you've begun to notice something strange, something you didn't expect. Reading became not just a skill, but a leisure activity. And for many, especially immigrants and the working poor, libraries were a free, quiet doorway into another life. You glance up once just to see if the room is still there. You nod, lower your voice to a whisper, and ask about that new book of essays. You're happier, not in the dramatic, headline-worthy way, but in small things, in rhythm, in the predictability of free time. Today you're going to the library. Some cities banned entire books, anything too romantic, too fantastical, too scandalous. Others simply misplaced them. Readers, of course, always found a way. Yes, the public library, that glorious, slightly dusty cathedral of quiet, funded by Andrew Carnegie's Guild, and maintained by women with sensible shoes and absolute authority. You enter reverently. This is the closest you've come to divine approval in months. The librarian, Miss Carmichael, gives you a look that has ended wars. She finds it. Of course she does. You sit by the window and watch the street lamps flicker to life. You take a seat by the tall window, where the light falls like something out of a painting. You open the book, and the world disappears. Here's your historical bookmark. Public libraries flourished in the 1920s, fueled by growing literacy rates and urban access. You don't need an answer. You read slowly, underlining a phrase with your finger, rereading a paragraph that feels like someone finally said what you've always thought, but couldn't name. It is, barely, obscure cultural curiosity. In the 1920s, librarians were seen as guardians of moral order. You return the book. Miss Carmichael inspects it as if it might be hiding secrets. She nods once. You leave quietly, walking past the stacks like you're tiptoeing through holy ground. Later that evening, Clara stops by with a jar of pickles and a new pair of gloves she's very proud of. You don't say much. Sometimes silence is the most luxurious use of time. Historians still debate whether these slower moments libraries, pickles, gloves, did more to shape the soul than the louder parts of the decade, because tonight the world feels just fast enough. And that's all you need. There's music coming from the neighbor's window. Not a radio, this time a real, live piano. Someone playing with two hands and half a memory. The tune stumbles here and there, like it's had a long day, but it finds its footing eventually. You lean against the window frame, eyes half closed, listening as the melody spills softly down the street. It's Thursday. Nothing remarkable has happened today, and that's the beauty of it. You did your shift. You folded your clothes. You stared at a potato for a full minute before deciding to eat it. And now, as evening drapes itself over the city like a wool coat, you're just here, alive, unbothered, almost rested. You decide to visit the roof. The climb is awkward, a narrow staircase that smells like old paint and decisions no one stands by anymore. The sky is peach-colored at the edges, and the city glows like it's holding its breath. But the door creaks open, and suddenly the world stretches wider. The rooftops go on, staggered and shingled. Little brick plateaus strung together by chimneys and laundry lines. You sit together, legs dangling over the edge, peeling fruit in silence. The juice drips onto your shoes. You don't care. Clara joins you. She brings 2 oranges and a newspaper folded into quarters. People use them for drying laundry, catching breezes, sneaking cigarettes, and, occasionally, pretending to be philosophers. It was cheap real estate for thoughts, and sometimes for naps. Here's your historical detail for the night. In the 1920s, rooftop access was common in cities. Clara reads the headlines out loud. Stocks up again. New song on the charts. Man arrested for selling whiskey out of a dentist's office. A phonograph plays a love song from an open window, warbling faintly through the warm evening air. You nod, impressed. Dental hygiene is important. Maybe both. Maybe joy was a kind of resistance. Maybe these quiet rooftop evenings were their own small rebellion. She grins and throws an orange peel off the roof. It spirals like a secret. Obscure tidbit. There was a brief trend in the 20s called rooftop dining. Hotels and apartment buildings would set up tables and string lights across their upper levels, letting guests eat spaghetti under the stars while pretending they weren't afraid of heights. It was elegant and mildly terrifying. You sit on that roof until the stars come out, one by one, like cautious performers at a curtain call. The countryside flashes past the window. Fields, barns, clotheslines full of shirts pretending to fly. Someone across the street sneezes. Someone else laughs. A friend of a friend has a cousin with a farm, and there's a gathering music, food, nothing fancy. Just people with time to spare. Historians still debate whether the emotional tempo of the 1920s was set by jazz or by exhaustion. You climb back down slowly, legs stiff, heart oddly light. Someone across the aisle is reading a copy of the Saturday Evening Post, and you catch the headline, 10 Ways to be Modern. And when you crawl into bed, the smell of orange peel still clinging to your fingers, you don't dream about factories or crowds or even dancing. There's a dirt path leading toward a red barn and a long wooden table already covered in pies and sliced apples and a jug marked just cider. You assume the lie is part of the charm. You dream about sky, Saturday again. You're on a train, now one of the newer models, sleekish and soot-colored, speeding away from the city, just fast enough to blur the edges. A small child attempts to sell you a rock. You're headed to the country, or what city people call the country, which really just means anywhere you can't buy a sandwich at midnight. Barn dances, picnics, socials, quilting bees. Community was the entertainment. People came together to celebrate a harvest, a birthday, or simply the absence of rain. This is a rare thing. Tournaments were held, techniques debated, bragging rights were eternal. One man once claimed to have played horseshoes for 24 straight hours without blinking. No one fact-checked him. You lean your head against the window, lulled by the rhythm of the rails. Slowly at first, then all at once tiny lanterns with no appointments to keep. You wonder what the 10 ways are. You doze for a bit. But authenticity is a tricky thing. It's not in the zip code. It's in the pie, the laughter, the moment you stop checking your watch. When you arrive, the air smells different, thicker, greener, less full of elbows. The whole scene looks like something from a postcard. Here is your historical snapshot. Rural leisure in the 1920s wasn't always about rest. It was about gathering. You join in a 3-legged race. You fall. Twice. Clara eats 5 deviled eggs, and what she insists is a record. Someone starts singing. Someone else plays the fiddle. You buy it. Later, you sit under a tree with a slice of pie and a mouth too full to argue with life. Obscure cultural tidbit. The game of horseshoes was wildly popular in rural America during this time. As the sun dips behind a line of trees, fireflies appear. The music gets softer. The laughter turns to murmurs. People gather their coats and their pie tins and their children, yawning and waving their goodbyes. You lie back in the grass, watching the stars come out, not in a hurry. Historians still debate whether rural leisure in the 1920s was more authentic than urban fun. You fall asleep on the train ride home, rocking gently, the distant smell of cider still somewhere in your sleeve. And you dream not of noise or parties or cities full of glitter. You dream of fireflies blinking across a field, quiet, endless, and yours. It's Monday again, but this Monday feels different. Softer, maybe, like the weekend left something behind. You step out of bed slowly, stretch until your joints protest, and open the window just wide enough to let in the morning. The street below is already alive, newspapers thudding against doors, a dog barking at nothing, 2 men arguing about baseball with equal parts passion and inaccuracy. You dress without thinking, the movement's worn into you now. Shirt, suspenders, boots, hat, pocket change, folded paper, borrowed confidence. Today after work you're going to the museum. You didn't plan it. Clara mentioned it, and it stuck. Something about ancient statues and a room full of dinosaur bones. So you finish your shift, wipe the grease off your hands, and head downtown. The museum is cooler than expected, temperature-wise and otherwise. You walk through great halls of marble and hushed footfalls. The floor clicks under your boots like it's keeping track of your mistakes. The air smells of old varnish and new discoveries. Exhibits became more interactive, more inclusive, and sometimes more controversial. What once required a monocle and a last name now only needed a nickel and curiosity. Here's your historical footnote. Museums in the 1920s were beginning to shift from elite institutions to more public spaces, especially in cities. You linger in the Egypt room. A mummified cat stares at you with what you assume is judgment. A man nearby insists loudly that he could build a pyramid if he had the time. You move on. It took someone 3,000 hours to build. You wonder if they were escaping something, or just passing time. You find yourself standing in front of a model ship, massive, detailed, tiny ropes and sails and cannons no bigger than crumbs. You and Clara wander through the natural history wing next. She points at the dinosaur skeleton and says, "That's what I feel like after a shift." The goal was to showcase modern domestic efficiency. The mannequins looked terrified. The ceiling opens like a dark mouth, and stars are projected across it one by one. A voice narrates the constellations. You lean back in your seat, letting the galaxy spin above you. It's quiet here. Deeply, perfectly quiet. You sit in the dark, watching a star blink out above you, and think, maybe that's the same thing. You nod, but with better posture. Obscure cultural detail. One traveling exhibit in the 1920s featured a full replica of a city block complete with mannequins posed doing housework and gossiping over fences. You end your museum visit in the planetarium. It's new. Historians still debate whether these new forms of leisure made people smarter or just more curious. You walk home without speaking much. Entire afternoons lost gazing through glass at things you may never own. Dresses, radios, shoes that claim to improve posture and marriage. You walk slowly, pausing at each display like you're reading a poem. The city glows in puddles and windows, and you go to sleep with ancient bones and distant stars tucked neatly behind your eyes. Advertisements promised beauty, love, and success in just 3 easy payments. Leisure wasn't just about what you did, it was about what you bought. You pick one that doesn't fit and insist it makes you look serious. The clerk pretends not to notice your budget and smiles anyway. Today you're going shopping. You feel briefly like someone who might one day own such a life. Not for anything you need, exactly. Just looking. It's called window shopping, a national pastime now. She walks like she's being followed by applause. One store has a mannequin wearing a fur coat and a fixed expression of mild disapproval. It was considered both modern and mildly scandalous. Some husbands objected. Others just asked for a new tie. Despite the visible grease stain on the wall, another displays a full picnic set, complete with checkered blanket and plastic grapes. You browse for an hour and leave with a tin of mints, a handkerchief, and a pencil that says, "Compliments of Bernstein's." And here's your historical snapshot. The 1920s saw the full birth of American consumer culture. Department stores became temples of wonder. Windows became silent salesmen. Clara joins you outside the Five and Dime. But sitting here, sipping something sweet, you don't feel anxious. You each try on hats. She picks one with a feather. Inside, the store smells like powder and ink and metal shelves. You both act like you've robbed a bank. Later, you sit on the edge of a public fountain, feet sore, bags light, and heads full of opinions about things you can't afford. You spot a woman across the street in a velvet coat, the kind you saw in the shop window earlier. Obscure cultural tidbit. In the 20s, shopping clubs became popular groups of women pooling money to take advantage of installment plans and credit schemes. You and Clara end your day with 2 lemonades and a shared sandwich at a soda counter that insists on calling itself the Crystal Palace. You talk about everything and nothing. Books, work, the weather, dreams that involve improbable furniture. Historians still debate whether consumer culture in the 1920s made Americans more free or more anxious. You just feel full of soda and sidewalks and windows full of someone else's imagination. And when you walk home, the street lights are flickering like they're applauding you too. It's the middle of July, the kind of hot that makes everything sticky and a little philosophical. Your clothes cling, your thoughts slow. The air tastes like metal and sidewalk. Today you're heading to the public pool, and you're not alone. Half the neighborhood is there before noon. Men in full wool swimsuits that defy both fashion and flotation. Kids shrieking like they've discovered sound for the first time. Women in bathing caps with rubber flowers that look mildly suspicious. You step into the cool water and immediately forget your own name. Some were built by philanthropists. Some were makeshift affairs, concrete slabs with ambition. But they became essential, especially during heat waves, which struck with regularity and without mercy. The pool isn't glamorous. The tiles are cracked. The lockers creak. The water smells like bleach and 100 decisions you can't undo. But it's freedom. Clean, quiet, floating freedom. Here's your historical ripple. Public pools boomed in the 1920s as cities sought to provide healthy recreation for the masses. Some were segregated, some weren't. You float on your back, staring up at a sky so blue it feels borrowed. Someone does a cannonball nearby. A lifeguard yells. A harmonica plays from somewhere behind a fence. You think about absolutely nothing. Obscure cultural side note. Swimming etiquette in the 1920s was a matter of public concern. Manuals advised against excessive splashing, unladylike diving, and unnecessary displays of athleticism. You sit on a curb, legs outstretched, letting the syrup drip and stain your fingers red. But you look around at the noise, the sun, the chaotic joy, and think, yes, of course, everyone ignored them. And the pool stayed packed. After an hour, you emerge reborn, slightly sunburned, slightly human again. You and Clara get snow cones from a cart that hasn't been cleaned since Wilson was president. Historians still debate whether urban recreation like this actually built community or just gave people a reason to tolerate each other. This is community. Not polished, not perfect, but loud and alive and sticky with grape-flavored ice. The country fell in love with its own reflection, and then started worrying about what it meant. And when the sun begins to sink and the shadows grow long, you walk home slowly, towel over your shoulder, skin still humming, and you fall asleep feeling rinsed. A man leans on a lamppost as if he invented it. It's 1929 now. You didn't notice it happen. There's talk of a market that never stops rising. The decade crept up slowly like everything else. One speakeasy, one jazz tune, one late-night conversation at a time. The hemlines rose. The radios multiplied. Today you sit on your stoop, watching the neighborhood move around you like a silent film reel. She says it doesn't. You say she's wrong. You both laugh like that solves something. A boy sells newspapers. A woman dusts a window ledge with righteous fury. Jazz, cars, markets, hemlines, headlines. Everything felt urgent. But beneath that speed was something slower, something made of porch steps, song lyrics, and the soft, strange art of doing nothing. The world is still spinning, but faster now. Cars are louder, buildings are taller, but they also started to worry about it. Were they too soft? Too indulgent? Too distracted? Magazines offered quizzes to assess your productivity potential. You declined to take them. And yet, here you are, still folding laundry, still listening to jazz, still wondering what Clara meant when she said she might leave for California. She hasn't, not yet. You share a sandwich and talk about how bread tastes different now. Here's your final historical footnote. The 1920s were about speed. Obscure cultural farewell. By 1929, Americans spent more time and money on leisure than ever before. You sit quietly, peeling an orange. A breeze moves through the alley like it's checking on everyone. A cat walks past with supreme purpose. Clara leans her head on your shoulder. No one speaks. Historians still debate whether the Roaring Twenties were an escape or an awakening, but to you, they were something else entirely, wrapped in something soft, your breath slow and gentle, like the final paragraph of a good book, a time to pause, softened by distance like a tune you used to know. Cars pass, but they no longer matter. Someone turns off a light in the building across the way. Someone locks their door and exhales, a chance to breathe. A decade made not only of dances and radios and train rides, but of long afternoons where you simply sat and watched a light change on a brick wall. You think of laughter shared over cheap coffee, of dance steps you never quite mastered, of the stars you watched from a field that still smells like clover. And when the first autumn chill settles over the city, you pull your coat tighter, and you go inside. The fire has gone out, not with drama, but with the quiet fade embers dimming into memory, warmth lingering only in your socks and in the space behind your eyes. You're lying down now. Let the stories settle into your chest, not to be carried, but to be worn softly like an old scarf, like a well-loved tune. Maybe in bed, maybe on the couch. You hear the hum of the city still, but it's far away, and everything slows. You think of rooftops and sidewalks, soda counters and Sunday mornings. Your muscles loosen. The weight of your day slips off, inch by inch. You don't have to remember every fact. You don't need to name every president or recall which year the Charleston became fashionable. You just need to rest. Let the decade drift like smoke through an open window. Tonight, the Roaring Twenties are behind you. Their jazz echoes through time, but it doesn't ask anything of you now. Only this, that you close your eyes, slow your breath, and drift. You've lived a dozen little lives tonight. That's enough. Now let go. And sleep.